I'm Chris Cangella, and welcome to our World War II Dad as we close out this limited podcast series with an episode we entitled A New Life. And this episode kind of focuses on Dad's return from the war, his single life, meeting our mom, and eventually us. And what I mean by us, of course, is myself and my 7 siblings, which definitely includes my fantastic co-host and brother, Ken Cangella. Now, Ken, it's been quite a journey for our father, Louis T. Cangella, who served as an Army private first-class soldier during World War II in Europe. Ken, we've gone over so much in this podcast. We really have looked at everything. What sticks with you the most?
That's a great question. As I reflect on the journey, I think about, I was reading a book when I was on the trip, and I was in Europe, following in Dad's footsteps. And in this book, in the foreword, there was a quote that just really struck home for me and kind of resonates with my feelings about, the podcast we've been doing and why I went to Europe to retrace Dad's footsteps. And the quote's from T.K. Whipple, and it reads as follows. It says, all America lies at the end of the wilderness road, and our past is not a dead past, but still lives in us. Our forefathers had civilization inside themselves, the wild outside. We live in the civilization that they created, but within us, the wilderness still lingers. What they dreamed, we live, and what they lived, we dream. So as I looked through that and I thought about that when I was there, I was thinking, when Dad went into the Army at 18, he's a high school graduate, lives in a civilized world in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he's thrust into this wilderness of a warring Europe in a bloody conflict. And so he goes from having, civilization inside him to venturing out into that wilderness. And I think about the soldiers and what their dreams were when they were over there. And, they just dreamed of wanting peace and coming home and resuming a normal life is what their dreams were. And it just really, it really struck me that way. And I look at the quote and I think, okay, they dreamed about that, and they dreamed about a civilized society for us, and that's what they've given us. I mean, you and I have been lucky. We didn't get drafted. There were no major conflicts when we were growing up. Our sons have not gotten drafted, so we're lucky in that way. And I think a lot of that has to do with what these veterans from World War II and other conflicts have done for this country. But to complete the quote, it talks about what they lived, we dream. And since we started doing this podcast, there's been many, many times where I dream about Dad and I wake up thinking about the podcast and what we went through. And I realize that, I live in a civilized world that he created for us, but I dream about that wilderness and that experience that he had during World War II.
Yeah, I mean, those guys could have thought of nothing more than just the simple comforts of home. And here we are imagining what they went through, right? I don't know if it's always dreams, could be nightmares, but we're amazed by that. And thank you to those men that did give us this opportunity for what we really call freedom, right? And being able to do what we wish. For me, in trying to think about what, struck me the most, and I've mentioned a couple of times on this podcast, but seeing how young Dad was, right? I mean, we talked about it, 18, and just seeing these pictures of him as a kid.
Yeah.
Dad had me when he was 42. They had me later in life. And so he was always kind of my older dad, older than most of my peers' dads, So it was a little different growing up. What things I didn't have with him because he was a little older. I had this history, and the folks gave me this love of big band music, a dad that at other ages aren't going to give that to you. So there's some really cool things that happened because of Dad being the age that he is. And, and I see Dad in World War II, and he's the age of what my sons are. I have a son who's 23. I have another one who's 31. It's in that age.
Yeah.
And they're old for going through that. I just remember them at that age, and myself, like we talked about it, being 18. And
Yeah.
That's just, those guys are incredible. The guys that served over there for World War II are just incredible. So it's a cool thing.
Yeah, I think about when I was 18, heading off to college as a freshman, and I went to a little community college, about 5.5 hours drive from home. And I left like the week before Labor Day weekend and drove all the way there, unpacked and everything. And I'd been there probably maybe 4 or 5 nights. And my roommate and I were like, well, what are we going to do? It's a 3-day weekend. We don't have school. So we piled back in the car because we were so homesick. And I think about Dad, he didn't have the luxury to go home after
No,
4 or 5 nights. Once he was gone,
I'm sure he
he
wanted to.
oh my gosh, I'm sure he wanted to. And so, this poor young man who lost his mother, and I had said it wrong earlier. I said at 13, he lost her about a year before at 17
Yeah.
or 16. So, he's lost his mother. He ships off. He's overseas. He's getting shot at. And I'm thinking, man, when I was 18, I was, so homesick. I went home the first 3-day weekend. I'd been at school for 4 hours. And I remember Dad said to Mom, is he going to come home every weekend?
Sounds like something Dad would say. I
Yeah.
don't know if you remember this, but I was the first one to know that you were home. I was outside when that white Subaru that you had pulled
Yeah.
up. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's Kenny. Kenny's home. So
Yeah.
I remember that
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So Dad told us in our last episode, he returned from the war by train to East
Yeah.
Liberty, and he walked up those steps to his home. Unbelievable. It's just heartwarming, and it really touched me. Do you know anything about what happened next?
Yeah, I was thinking about him walking up those steps, and if you remember in the home movies, the Kathy shot, he talks about he put his duffel bag on his shoulder and he walks up those steps. And I got to thinking about this, Chris. What's in that duffel bag? Okay, he's got other uniforms, probably so spare clothes and stuff like that, but he's also got in there the Nazi flag he confiscated. He's got the Italian Beretta pistol that he came home from Regensburg with that the Crown Prince gave him. He's got all the stuff that I went through that helped me piece this story together. He's got in that duffel bag, the calling cards, the pictures. It's all in that duffel bag, and he saved it all those years. And I was able to unlock the story based on that prayer card and the journey that he had made. So I think about him walking up those steps that way. Isn't that pretty neat to think about
Yeah,
that?
you're giving me goosebumps because everything that we discuss, this whole podcast is in that duffel bag that came home with him,
Yeah.
and you unpacked it. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
whew, okay. Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah. So in addition to him carrying that duffel bag, I think about what he's wearing. And so the soldiers, when they weren't wearing what they called their Parsons jacket, which is that dirty jacket Dad's wearing in Belgium when he runs into his brother, they're wearing their Eisenhower jacket. So this
Wow.
is the Eisenhower jacket, and it's that real short-waisted coat, and it's just a beautiful piece of memorabilia that he's got here. So I borrowed it from Mom. I've got it here. It's been hanging behind me through the whole podcast, and it's just really fascinating to look at because you look at the left shoulder patch is the patch for the 99th Infantry Battalion Separate, which is Dad was a replacement for. That's where he was first joined up with them. And then on the other sleeve is a different patch.
That looks just like it.
Doesn't
What
it?
is that? Yeah.
It's the 474th Infantry Regiment patch that they were folded into when they went to Barnville.
So not only did they fold in the soldiers, but they folded in their whole logo and look into their patch. Yeah,
they did. And I wonder about the black striping above the ship. And I wonder if that maybe reflects back on one of the other units that they were folded into. So I'll have to do some research on that. But those are his two shoulder patches. And then, you see on this lapel is it's the infantry symbolism for the Army infantry. And then on this one, you see is the U.S.
Yeah.
That's that one. And then this one's interesting. This is the Free French Forces pin. And he really probably shouldn't have this on his jacket. If he was in active service, he probably wouldn't be allowed to wear it. But for some reason, and maybe he didn't have it on them, but he put it on this jacket at some point in time. And I've reached out to various World War II guys, and nobody can pin down how he would have come across it. We haven't solved it yet. So it's a lingering mystery as to Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so maybe someone who's watching or listening to this podcast can let us know if they know what surrounds that pin,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then why would Dad and anybody in the 99th have it? That would be really interesting for us to find. So this quest continues.
It does because there's got to be a story behind this. Did he trade somebody for it?
Right.
Did he do something that somebody gave it to him? Who knows? So it's a great jacket. And then on the sleeve,
Yeah.
there's three bars, and each bar represents 6 months of overseas service. So he's got
Wow.
18 months, of overseas service. So and then he wore these couple of things on
Oh
his
yeah.
left breast. So the top one is the combat infantryman's badge. And then the bottom one is the European, Africa, Middle East ribbon with 5 bronze stars.
What do those stars represent?
So the stars represent each of the 5 campaigns that the 99th fought in. So they list out each of the campaigns that he was active in, and the campaigns are missing from my notes.
That's okay. I
Yeah,
think we got them though. I think we can
yeah,
talk about them because they were. I know
yeah,
one was France, right?
right. So there's Normandy,
Yeah,
Northern France,
and then
Rhineland,
which was Aachen and Würselen, right?
Aachen and Würselen.
Or in
Yeah,
Rhineland, yep. And
yeah, it
then of
was right.
course they did the now I'm forgetting it too.
The Ardennes,
The Ardennes,
which is the Battle of the Bulge.
Battle of the Bulge, and then you
And,
said there was something where they just were in Europe, like Southern Europe.
Central Europe, which would be
Okay,
like cleanup operations in Regensburg.
got it.
So that's why there's 5 stars on the ribbon.
That's so
So
cool.
yeah, and then the other things that are pinned to his flag that we have are his Good Conduct Medal and his Victory in World War II medal, and his dog tags. Of course, we
Yeah,
have, and of course, he had a St. Christopher's medal attached to his dog tags as well.
yeah, it did its job. It kept him
Yeah,
safe.
yeah,
That's incredible. And you know what? It was remarkable when you're showing both, you know, here where you're showing the jacket live and some of the photos that we're sharing about the medals and the things on the jacket.
yeah.
It's in such great shape. I mean, this thing is so old. I mean, gosh, it was, 44, 45. So we're coming up on, 2024. So
Almost 80 years.
it's almost
Yeah,
80 years. And those
yeah,
medals and that hardware looks
yeah.
like it was minted 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's in pristine condition. And, of course, I think all of us boys have at one time or another tried that jacket on.
Yeah. Doesn't
And
fit.
I mean, he was 5'6", yeah,
Yeah.
128 pounds, I think, when he enlisted. I mean, he looks a little beefier when he got out because I think he'd earned it. He put some muscle on and
Yeah.
really became a man. So,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think Dad even tried it on later in life, and I
yeah,
remember him doing so. And
yeah,
it seemed to fit him okay. Maybe a little
yeah,
snug around the belly, but it fit him all right.
yeah, yeah. It did. It did. You could tell it was his jacket, and I think he was very proud of that jacket, as he should be.
All right. So outside of the war, once he's moved on to that, what was he doing for the next couple of years and as a single man?
So, his bachelor days are harder to piece together because, did you keep a lot of memorabilia
I
of those
sure hope
days?
not. I hope no one finds out any information about that.
Yeah,
Shush, the wife's in the next room.
right. Yeah, exactly. So I came across a few things that kind of gave me a glimpse of what he was probably like. I think he enjoyed a good time, especially, you come out of the army. You've made a lot of friends. You've been hanging around with just guys, for 2 years. So he had a big group of friends he still hung out with, and went to the VFW with. And I found some pictures that are just really precious to me. And two of my favorites are from New Year's Eve 1947. And in those pictures, he's in a really cool looking suit, and you can just tell he's having a good time. He's got some kind of beverage in his hand. I'm not sure what it was, but he had a beverage in his hand, and
He's earned it.
he's earned it. Yeah. And everybody just looks so relaxed because now it's, 2 years after the war. And there's another, photo of him at that same time. He's fooling around in the kitchen with some guy playing the violin, and he's holding up a cap gun pistol at him. Who knows what they were doing, but it
Just
just
goofing
looked,
around. Good
yeah,
friends.
goofing around, looked like a good time. I would have loved to have been there and sat across the table from him and had a beer and been able to see what our young bachelor
It would
dad
have
was
been
like.
seeing Dad in a different light than we were used to growing up. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Now, what other activities did he do? Was he doing anything?
Yeah, so from what I can piece together, he played on the VFW football team, and man, you see the old uniforms they're in. I don't even know if their helmets had face masks back then. They probably
Or any
didn't.
padding.
Yeah, and there's a group photo of them. It's taken at some point in time, and he told me he played center, which I thought was interesting for a smaller guy,
Yeah.
but he played center, and
Now, wait a minute. I see this photo. I don't see a circle that says me or any pointing to where I'm at in this group photo.
yeah, isn't that funny? That's
Yeah.
one he didn't do it on because
Maybe he grew up a little bit
yeah, it could be. Yeah, yeah.
for
So
sure.
so that was neat. And then I came across other pictures of him out on the lake canoeing, being out in the forest with his buddies and doing things like that. So, and I know he's a big bowler. He
Right.
loved sports. He bowled a lot. They were a very good bowling group in East Liberty. They even won a championship. So I know bowling was really, really big to him. So he was a pretty athletic guy, and I think the whole family took after him from an athletic standpoint. Although mom can punt a football pretty well.
She always wanted to punt, and I think she did when she was pregnant with me, and that could
Yes.
explain some things. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
for yeah, incredible. He had some really cool things that he did, and he got to enjoy himself for a couple years, of course, right after the war, right?
Yeah, he did. He enjoyed himself, and one thing he told when he first got back, and this was on some of the movies that Kathy shot, is he had to go buy clothes. I mean, you're away for 2 years. He's outgrown his clothes. You can tell from looking at his earlier pictures in 43 to 1945. So he had to go buy clothes and shoes, and he commented on after wearing army boots for 2 years when he bought dress shoes, he couldn't believe how pointy the toes were on them because as I have a photo from my friend Folker wearing those boots, you can tell the toes were fairly
Yeah,
square on them, and so he gets home to the new fashions and the pointy toe dress shoes, and it's funny that stuck in his mind. He mentions it all those years later
yeah,
that the shoes were pointy. So yeah, he assimilated, and I'm sure he got into the swing of things. Went to college and really went through college quite quickly on the GI Bill so that he could get to work and start his career as a produce broker.
yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
We need to know more, though. We need to know more about this whole thing.
Yeah. So the best way to find out more about that period is to go talk to our 91-year-old mother and revisit with her again about her experiences during that time.
So I'm honored once again to introduce you all to our World War II mom, Patricia Spacuzza Cangella. Mom, thanks for joining us again.
My pleasure, son.
So earlier episode, we talked about meeting dad and dating dad, but there's some stuff that happened with dad after he came home from the war. What do you remember? That obviously he told you about it because you didn't know him yet, but what was dad doing when he got back?
Well, when he got out of the service, the government gave them what they called 5220. They got $20 for 52 weeks. And then they gave him the opportunity to go to college for free. His brothers didn't take advantage of that. Your dad was the only one that did. And as I said before, he majored in accounting. And some of his friends went to Notre Dame and Pitt and Duquesne University, where your dad went. Then he graduated from there and started to work for Jerry Schwab. Like I said, we met there. Now, he ran around with a bunch of all Irishmen, except there was one Jewish boy, and my husband, the Italian. And they would sit around and drink beer and sing Italian songs. And your dad had a beautiful voice and knew all the words to the Irish songs. So we would, on Saturday nights, we would go to the American Legion, and they had a nice dance hall there, and we would dance. And he would have drinks, but he would order a Shirley Temple for me, and I would have ginger ale, and he would ask the waitress to put a cherry in it for me to make it look good. So we would do that. And then my dad took sick. He had a brain tumor and had surgery. And so I couldn't go out much. Your dad, God love him, he came up to my house and sat in my room where my dad had a bed in my room. And I took care of my dad and dated your father that way. So he must have been a pretty good guy.
I think
Yeah.
we'll keep him.
Yeah, I think so too. And then one by one, the guys got engaged, but we used to go to picnics and dances and movies and things like that, and really enjoyed those 2 years. And then one by one, they were getting married, and Daddy and I got married. And then a year later, we had Claudia, our oldest. And then you just kept coming and coming and coming down to Christopher, my eighth.
That's right.
Where and how did Dad propose, Mom? I don't think I've ever heard that story.
Well, you won't believe this. He didn't have much money. And when I was dating him, I said to him, "Are you saving money?" And he said, "No." And I said, "You need to put at least 10% away and save money. You never know when you're going to need it." So he did do that. But he used to go bowling 3 nights a week. That took up quite a bit of his money. And he went golfing every chance he got. So this one time, he comes to my house on a Tuesday night, and it was near Valentine's Day, and he had a diamond ring for me. The reason he had a beautiful diamond ring for me was because he hit the numbers. It's like the Powerball or lottery. He hit the numbers, and he went and bought me my diamond ring that way. So that's how I got engaged.
You said so many things that really explain some of our characteristics: playing golf, gambling, bowling.
Yes.
So yeah, we get some of that for sure. So okay,
absolutely.
so Dad graduated from college, Duquesne University, right? He's working for the other gentleman, and then he gets a job with C.H. Robinson, right? Is that how it works?
Yes. Of course, as I've told you, boys, always work hard for the people for whom you are working, because other people are going to notice you. Well, they did notice your dad. And C.H. Robinson got a hold of Dad, and they said to him, "We'd like you to come work for us. How much is Jerry Schwab paying you?" My husband was getting $55 a week. He lied and said he was getting 60. So they paid him $65 a week. And he went to work for C.H. Robinson and worked for them for 33 years.
And then you guys were in Pittsburgh?
Yes.
And how many children did you have in Pittsburgh before you moved?
We had the 2 girls, Claudia and Linda. And then we moved. He was transferred to St. Louis. And we had Kathy, Lou, and Ken were all born in St. Louis. Then he was transferred, thank God, to Colorado, beautiful Colorado. And then you other children were born there.
That's right. So that's Phil and Patty and myself.
That's right.
Rounding out the lot.
You're the natives. Yeah. So it was a nice big family. And of course, we have 18 grandchildren now. And we're expecting our 23rd great-grandchild in August. There's a big group of us.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Mom, to just go back in time a little bit, because all of those children you mentioned wouldn't be here unless Dad survived the war, which is part of what we're, breaking down in our talking. So when he came back from the war, did he ever talk about the war with you one-on-one?
No one talked about the war. My sister's husband, Dick, never said a word to us about it. All of my husband's friends, they never talked about the war. And that's just too bad, because we didn't get to hear their experiences. But I guess that upset them so much. I remember, Ken, we would go to the movies and we would see newsreels. And then one by one, you would see these young men who were home on leave get up and walk out. They couldn't stand to watch it and to hear the noise of the guns and things. It just upset them so badly.
Did that ever bother Dad? If like hearing a loud noise or any of that kind of stuff, especially, in the younger years when you guys were first together, did you ever see him react in any way like that?
Here's a funny thing that happened. I learned, and this was when we were here in Colorado, if your children woke up during the night and had a little nightmare, I couldn't get you back to sleep unless I would take you in the bathroom and get a warm washcloth and wipe your face. So that's what I would do. So your dad was taking his shower before he was getting ready to go to bed. And I went in the bathroom. Well, I didn't want the child to wake up completely. So I turned the light out, and your father immediately dropped down as low as he could get.
Mm.
And that's from the war. He said, I asked him about it later. He said, instinct. He said, something like that happens, you go down as low as you can.
Wow, interesting.
So it stayed with him, and that's here in Colorado. So it was a good many years that that came back to him.
You know, you bring up another interesting thing earlier, Mom, when you said that they didn't talk about it. I think it's true of the greatest generation, the guys in World War II. They didn't talk about this war, right? And I think it ate them up too, and made them maybe a little more stoic, right, Ken? Is that what you've heard too?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I learned in talking to Claudia's father-in-law, Bob McAdam, who was a prisoner of war, I had talked to him for a good hour one time at a family get-together, and he stopped me towards the end. He goes, Ken, why do you want to know about all this stuff? And I said, Mr. McAdam, I said, you're living, breathing history, and we only have so much time left to partake in that history. And he goes, oh. And I go, why don't more of you guys talk about it? He goes, well, every Tom, Dick, and Harry that came back from the war had a story, and nobody wanted to hear them, because there's just so much of it. And so they just want to get on with their lives and get back to normalcy. And that's understandable.
It is understandable. But we living this pampered, easy life, it's completely different, than we've ever experienced. So we want to know, gosh, you had this hardship. But to all of them and in that group, they're all in it together because so many boys had to go serve, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And back to, Dad telling stories, Mom, you had mentioned to me once that when war movies would come on, what would he do when he'd watch a war movie with you?
Well, he would say, oh, you see this place over here? Well, if you go down that street and go over here, this would be there. He had the memory of where he had served, and he could see it. And he would just tell me all about it. And I thought that was fascinating, that he could remember. And the church was over there, and I hid in this building, and that kind of thing.
And we're so glad. Yeah, we're so glad that he told you that kind of stuff, because I think that sparked something in Ken, because that's what he just got back from doing. As we talked about earlier in these episodes, Ken just got back from Europe and was living in that movie and trying to see where that church was and that kind of thing.
And picturing Dad in those places, it was mind blowing to know that he stood there. And I saw churches where he slept in overnight between battles, and I'm probably on a pew or on the floor, just exhausted. And so no wonder when he'd see the movies, he'd be like, yeah, that would be burned into your memory. I know exactly where the church is, or I know exactly which buildings I had to run through. It's fascinating to think of it that way.
And boys, after we moved here to Colorado, we joined All Souls, and all of you children were educated at the school there at All Souls. And we made many good friends there. And those men had served too. Mm-hmm. And there was a man called Judge Morse. He worked for OSHA, and he had his leg shot off. And he had back then we used to call them wooden legs. I never saw it, so I don't know what his was made of. But he never talked about it. And then there was another gentleman that was in the Air Force, and he told the story once that he was flying the airplane, and he flew under a bridge and got into big trouble. So they had a few stories that we could hear that we enjoyed. But generally speaking, they didn't talk about it. We've
seen a couple of those stories that Dad has shared with the kids and whatnot. Hey, Mom, before we let you go, if you had to think about it, and we're not you're putting you on your spot here a little bit, but what would you want people to know most about your husband, our World War II dad, Louis Cangelo? What would you want them to know most?
He was a very generous man. He always helped out the little guy, whatever was needed. I remember a nun at All Souls. She was on a diet, and she asked him to get her a box of grapefruit, because that was the grapefruit diet craze. And then Dr. Scavuzzo, our dentist, good Italian man, made his own spaghetti sauce. He would ask him to bring home some good crates of tomatoes so he could make his tomato sauce. And he was always helping out some way. He worked over at All Souls, He did, he was a PTA president, booster club, and very active in the church, sang in the choir, was an usher. I can't remember even sitting in a pew with him. I'd take you kids to church, and I was there with you kids all the time. But he was doing his thing, serving the Lord.
Mom, I remember at Dad's funeral, there was a part of the eulogy that talked about things that he did even while he was on dialysis. And what struck me was he did all of these charitable acts, and he never bragged about it. He never spoke about it. He did it quietly behind the scenes, and he didn't want people to know what he was doing, but he took care of the people around him.
There was, when he was on dialysis, there was a young boy there, and he was mentally challenged. But he was probably in his late teens, and some group would bring him in. He was in some kind of a home, and they would put him on dialysis. Now, dialysis patients used to get very cold, and I always had a pillow for Dad and a blanket to keep him warm. This young boy didn't have anything, and he used to play with the little Matchbox car. And Dad said to me, Pat, I want you to go to the store and buy him a pillow and a blanket. So I did, and I gave it to one of the nurses. I said, would you be responsible to keep it clean for him? And she did. But he did things like that all the time.
I guess when you think about his generosity and the kind of man he was, you had a good inclination about who that man was when he sat in that room with you and your father, when your father was ill. It was the same type of guy, right?
That's right. And he had so many friends, I thought he can't be that bad because they all loved him.
Well, thank God that you loved him as well. And thank you for sharing these stories and being with us. I know that many people are going to appreciate, hearing our lives, because it's truly an American story, right? I mean, it's what a lot of Americans went through. Guys came home from the war, they started their families, and they worked hard, and they gave everything they had to our country during the war and to their families once they got home.
Yeah,
Yes,
Mom.
the flag.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ben.
Go ahead, Mom.
I was going to say there was never a 4th of July or Memorial Day that Dad didn't put the flag and hang it outside our house. He loved his country.
Yeah, and he showed it. And honestly, both you and Dad, in your own ways, raising 8 kids, did a fantastic job. You were hard on us when you needed to be hard on us, and you loved us nonstop. And it's really made a difference in our lives, and really helped us to become fathers to our sons and try to raise them, and daughters, and try to raise them the way you and Dad did. You guys set a great example because you're the greatest generation.
Yes, I think the greatest generation is right, Kenny. And you boys are just wonderful. I'm so proud of all of you, and my daughters too.
Of course. Well, we're proud of you, Mom, and we love you so much. And thanks again for being part of this story, which is our World War II dad, but you're the best. You're our World War II mom.
Well, it's nice seeing both of you again. Love you both.
Love you too, Mom. Wow, it's great hearing from Mom again. And I got to tell you, doing this project, I spent many hours over there going through the files and the credenza and just listening to her stories. And I heard some stories that I'd never heard before, like the naked gals on the White Cliffs of Dover, waving as they sailed home. I'd never heard that story before. So I really learned a lot. And, it makes me reflect that, that those of us that our parents are getting older, take some time and talk to them about the old days with them. Don't just share your news, but really talk to them about what their life was like. Because, man, it's just a treasure trove of things to learn from them.
Yeah, and if you get an opportunity, try to record it too, because you will want it. Trust us. We're thankful that our sister recorded Dad back in '96, so we have those stories. So please record your parents, talk to them about their lives. Absolutely. Great advice. Thinking about Mom and seeing her tell us these stories. I mean, she's 91 and she's in fantastic shape. We've talked about it many times. I remember being at her house a couple of years back, and I know she did this, but I saw it happen. She rides her stationary bike in the family room in front of the TV, somewhat 20 miles. There's not a lot of resistance on there, but she's pedaling for 20 miles. She's great. I mean, that's an incredible feat. and she still continues it. So no wonder she's 91 and healthy as she is. She really puts effort into it.
Yeah, yeah, she really does. And she still mows her lawn, and it
I
drives me
wish,
crazy.
yeah, me too. Don't go out
Yeah,
and shovel the snow. Let
yeah,
somebody else come out. No,
right.
I'm just going to get the top layer off. No,
Yeah,
mom.
yeah,
So, mom went over what dad did right after the war. And then, of course, going to college and being a produce broker and then getting married. What else do you know about him from, it's the early 50s, earliest to mid 50s, right?
yeah. Just a couple of things I was able to find looking through the old photos and things like that. One of my favorite photos is a group of dad and his friends coming out of church, and they're all, man, the guys just dressed. People don't dress like that anymore. They were dressed to the nines, and it looks like a Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra Rat Pack photo. These
It
guys are
does.
so cool looking out on the street, and they just look so relaxed. And you look at those guys, and they're all veterans. And man, that had to feel good to be home and thankful coming out of church like that. So that's one of my favorite photos of them and memory of dad in the early 50s. But he graduated, he got to work. Mom told the story about how he worked for her dad's competitor, Jerry Schaub, and after he did that, he went to work for C.H. Robinson. But I was thinking about him being a produce broker. He went to school and studied accounting, and I'm not sure how he got this first job as a produce broker. He ended up being in sales versus accounting, although he was always really good with math.
Right.
But you think about his history as a produce broker, and his when his dad immigrated to America, he actually pushed a fruit and vegetable cart up and down the streets, selling stuff right off the cart to the neighbors. And when I was on my European trip, I went to Lascari in Sicily. And the first thing that happens when I'm walking down through the streets of Lascari is this truck drives by and it's loaded with onions and garlic. And this guy's out the window yelling at everybody in Italian, "Hey, come out and get it. I got fresh stuff right here. You better buy it while you can." And I thought, man,
Yeah.
the produce brokerage bloodline runs deep in this family,
Yeah,
I
it's
think.
definitely in the blood. That's for sure. I
Yeah,
remember as a kid, dad had the fortune of some of the guys, the ones that supplied him with the produce and fruits and vegetables and whatnot would
yeah,
say, yeah, we have some extras. Happy to take those home to your family and that kind of stuff. And so we had things out of season. We had
hmm,
some great healthy alternatives to the fast food that I might have had growing up, and it was some delicious stuff. And I didn't appreciate it back then, but now, boy, when I want a strawberry and it's out of season, I'm like, oh, where's dad when you need him? We
yeah,
could have used some of that stuff there. So,
yeah.
yeah, he definitely gave us some great treats in the form of fruits and vegetables. That's for sure. What's next?
Well, so they're still in Pittsburgh, and mom and dad get married on August 15th, in 1952. And what a beautiful couple they were. I'm just
So nice to
amazing.
see them young like that, and it looks
Yeah,
like a great celebration. And
yeah,
but you got to imagine it's Pittsburgh, it's August. It could have been hot. It could have been so
yeah,
humid. So, but
yeah.
yeah, what a great time that must have been. And it's nice to see them so happy and so young there. So, yeah.
Right.
And then I guess they started the family pretty close after that, right?
Yeah, they started a family, and they I don't know if they planned on a big family, but everybody had big families back then. So yeah, they had their firstborn Claudia about a year after they were married, and then Linda came along. And so they had the two girls in Pittsburgh, and then of course Dad was moving up the ladder. He'd gone from Jerry Schwab to C.H. Robinson in employment, and they wanted him to move to St. Louis. So they moved to St. Louis, and they get to St. Louis in about 1955 and settle there in an apartment. And while they're in St. Louis, Kathy's born, brother Lou is born, and I'm born in St. Louis. As much as I hate to tell people that, because I like to claim I'm a Colorado native,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I'm the
yeah,
Colorado native that now lives in the Midwest. So something
uh,
went wrong
yeah,
there.
right, yeah, exactly. Isn't that funny how it works that way? Yeah,
Exactly.
so they put down roots in St. Louis for a bit of time in the 50s, and Dad continued to work for C.H. Robinson there.
Wow, and it looks like, some of the things we've seen is it mom's mom that came and visited a little bit and went on some trips with the kids and maybe you guys?
Yeah, I think mom's mom came out to help when one of the kids was born. It probably could have been me. I'm
Well,
not
you're a lot of
sure.
trouble. Probably was you.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably I was a load. But yeah, I think she came out and spent some time with mom, and I think they did some of the touristy things around there. I don't know if it was shortly after they settled or if they'd been there for a while. But they got to know the area a little bit. But St. Louis wasn't near and dear to mom's heart at all when she tells the
No,
story.
when
There's
we
too
talk
many.
about the Pittsburgh, humidity, it was worse. And I'm in Chicago, so I've been in St. Louis during the summertime to catch a Cubs and Cardinals game, and
Yeah.
it's miserable down there. So yeah, definitely. And that before air conditioning was widely used too, so they had to have been miserable. So I'm sure they're very thankful that coming into the '60s that featured another move, and then of course more of us, right?
Right. Yeah. So C.H. Robinson decided to open up an office in Denver, and they wanted Dad to open that office. And so they picked up and moved again and settled in Inglewood. And they rented a small place, a house, not too far from where we grew up. And they were paying $125 a month in rent in the early 60s. And mom hated throwing that rent money away. And when the landlord raised the rent on her, she sat Dad down and she said, "We got to buy a house. We're not going to rent all our lives." And so she got a realtor. A realtor showed her this new development being built on Delaware called Delaware Heights. Can't you just picture it? And
Yeah.
sure enough, they had a home built, and the brood was already growing. So instead of having a garage put on it, mom said, "I want another bedroom, no garage." So that's, when you scraped your windows all those years now, you know why.
Yeah.
But we needed another bedroom. So they settled into the house on Delaware, and they only paid about $13,000 for that house in the early 60s.
Wow, I thought it was 19,000, but you could be right. I don't know. We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was amazing how inexpensive that was, and that leads me to something I was thinking about when you're telling these stories and what we heard from mom. I think our lives would have been a little different if Dad would be with somebody else, because Dad, would spend money, would gamble, maybe wouldn't keep track of everything. I think we owe everything to Mom about being able to, she made sure Dad saved money, of course, for
Yeah.
the ring that we talked about earlier. And
Right.
then, she didn't want to spend money and throw this money away for rent. She wanted to own something and she had a good head on her shoulders
Mhm.
for business, and also for being, frugal. And I know that's kind of led to you being, sharp in what you do. There's good reason to plan for these things and reap the benefits when you do, right?
Yeah, Dad was a good earner, but Mom was definitely the saver and the planner, and she's, they were a good team together when it came
For
to
sure.
finances. And they made a lot of good decisions. Mom's 91, and Dad certainly left her with enough to live comfortably. She doesn't have to worry. So they were
Yeah, and
very successful.
she's been smart with her money and takes good
Yeah.
care of it. That's for sure. Okay, so that Delaware house, boy, it
Yeah.
brings back so many memories. I mean, it's the only home that I truly knew. They get into it in the early 60s, and they
Yeah.
have, Phil, my sister Patty, our sister Patty, and me at that house. And, it was a great house. Now, can you imagine 8 kids and, two adult parents in this 4-bedroom house? And what are you going to do? And I remember we all shared different rooms with
Yeah.
different siblings.
Hmm.
And then Dad finished the basement, right, to make a room for the girls at first. And then it
Yeah.
turned into your big room for the boys. And then when you guys left, I got the whole basement to myself. So
Yeah.
it was an incredible house with such great memories. And God, I loved it there.
Yeah, it was a really good house. And it was a great neighborhood. We had so much fun playing outside with all the neighborhood kids, of course. And like you said, that finishing the basement was ideal because we needed that space for, 8 kids in the family. And yeah, it just worked out. And Dad eventually added a nice family room and a 2-car garage to it when
Yeah.
he got most of us out of the house, so he had a little bit of extra spending money. And they turned it into a nice property. And today it's worth about around $630,000, if you can believe that.
That's just ridiculous.
Isn't that
That is
crazy?
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And some other memories I remember of that house. Now there's an open field that was in our backyard behind our house, and we called it the Dirt Hills.
Uh-huh.
And we were able to ride our bikes over there. We're able to dig, in the dirt, and just
Yeah.
it was a perfect place to just be outside. And of course, Mom wanted us all outside because,
Yeah.
gosh, we'd drive her crazy. So I
Right.
remember being out there in the Dirt Hills, and then another memory that comes back about that house is Dad had poker night, and I think he had a host maybe once a month, and he always played poker. Do you remember the night of the week it was?
Thursday nights.
Thursday nights,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And he would have
yeah.
poker night, and I remember them setting up for that. And that mom would make all these sandwiches and stuff, and say, "Okay, you guys can't have any, but I'll make some for you guys to have that will be in the kitchen, but don't eat any of the men's stuff." I'm like, "Okay, mom, sure." And she made some special treats, and just this feeling I remember, and I don't know how much you have of this, but going to sleep on a Thursday night and hearing those guys laugh and the chips. And of course, back then there's a lot more smoking. So waking up the next day and smelling that smoke, but it was okay. It was just home,
Yeah. Well, and they would rotate who hosted, if you remember. And well, I remember when Dad wasn't hosting, he would be gone for the evening to go play poker. That was a fun night for us because Mom would let us do stuff that Dad wouldn't. And we used to play sock baseball. We'd roll up a pair of socks into a ball, and I don't know if we'd hit it with a tennis racket or what. And then we'd run around the dining room table, and we were just drenched in sweat and laughing, just having a good time. Then we had to clean up, before we went to bed, so Dad wouldn't see any of the evidence of us playing and running around in the house.
Yeah, one more dad story, which I tell to this day, is, Dad worked hard, as we've alluded to, and he would come home and he would turn on which was PBS station Channel 6, and watch the McNair-Lehrer report, I think, McNeil-Lehrer report.
Yeah.
And get the news of the day. And, I'm 10, 11, 12, maybe even younger. I want to watch Happy Days. I want to watch Laverne and Shirley, whatever was on. And so Dad would put that on, and sure enough, he'd fall asleep watching it because he's tired. So back in the day, you didn't have a remote control, so you had to go up and turn the knob on the TV. And as soon as you do that, it'd go like that. And as you turn it, and he'd wake up.
Yeah.
He goes, "I was watching that." I said, "Dad, you were sleeping." He goes, "I was just resting my eyes."
You're right.
So you got to find creative ways, and we would turn down the sound, turn the channel, and then turn back up the sound to watch what we wanted to watch. But just great memories of that house. It's just, it was fun stuff. And
but the things that I don't have the best memory in the world, but the things that I rely on that help me remember these things is to go back and look at the old Super 8 millimeter films that Dad shot back in the day. They're just wonderful.
Yeah, and because I'm in this business, they weren't Super 8 because Super 8 had audio. These are just 8 millimeter films. But you're absolutely right. They were the treasure thing. And if there was an event happening, Dad would pull out this camera. And of course, that camera had that super bright sun gun light that would mount on that and blind you as he would pan over and see you there. So, it didn't have audio, but it had that.
Yeah, those were some great movies.
And I'm glad probably that it didn't have that audio, because can you imagine watching those back and hearing 8 screaming children, in those films? Or we must have just driven them nuts anyway. It's just crazy.
Yeah, we probably did. Yeah, 8 screaming Italian children.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's reminisce. I remember a film that we have of I think it was Thanksgiving. You get to see the family all gathered around the table, and Patty's in a high chair, so I'm thinking this is probably early to mid 60s. And you see Patty, and you see all the kids gathered around the table, and you see Dad eating. And you usually didn't get to see Dad very often because he was the one usually running the camera. That's probably why everybody's not blinded by that big light on this one. But it's just nice to see those Thanksgiving. Just sharing the meals and doing that. Those films are great.
Yeah, they really are. And the video camera was kind of Dad's domain, but I have to say, I think Mom shot better footage because Dad would move the camera way too fast, as I'm sure shaky. It must drive you crazy being in the business.
Yeah, he wasn't the best. And, I got great things from my father, and I'm thankful I didn't get that tact.
Yeah. So. But he made a point of getting that camera out every Christmas, and he recorded a lot of our Christmases. And Christmas was always a big deal at our house. And, I wonder if it was because of Malmedy and the Christmas he spent there that he wanted to make a big deal out of it, or if that was Mom's influence. I don't know, or both of them together. But they always made a big deal out of Christmas. They just showered us with presents. And with 8 kids, that had to be a financial burden. I know they would save up all year to have money for the Christmas presents. And boy, we would get into that basement and just be blown away by presents scattered everywhere.
And Dad would always start off the film, showing the date on the calendar, so we had at least a chance to see what year it was. I think it always was on the 25th, though. That never really changed, Dad. But he would show what day of the week that was, and then he'd show the great presents and everything. And there were years, even more so when you were younger, where the parents were struggling. We didn't have much, but you know what? I don't think any of us knew it. They did, but we didn't.
Yeah.
We had the things that we needed. We shared. And we had the best memories, and some of those films are the memories that we have and we cherish now. Of course, with Christmas started this tradition of us walking down the steps. Dad would always videotape from the bottom of the steps and have the kids go in reverse age order, So there's years where I'm not there yet, There's years where Patty's being carried by Claudia because she's the baby.
Yeah.
And then years where she's walking down, and then years where I start joining the group. And we go down in age order, and it's just really nice to see everybody and they grow. And then, Claudia got married. So here her husband, Gary, is now joining the clan. And so it was just neat to do that. So much so that I drive my family nuts to this day that my adult children, I make walk down the stairs on Christmas morning. And they always, they oblige me to do that, but they think I'm crazy. And we probably thought Dad was crazy at that time, but it's one of my favorite memories about Christmas in the old films.
It was a neat way to capture the transition of everybody over the years, and it was a really good idea. And I'm sure that your kids probably complain and moan about it, but someday, Chris,
that's right.
When they got a little gray, they're going to thank you for that.
Yeah, they'll do a whole podcast on me as an editor. My World War, no, like editor Dad. Something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then of course they always, Easter was a big deal too. And usually the films about Easter, started with coming home from church. And there's some really great ones that you see. And before my time, again, at the Delaware house of them coming home, you kids coming home with mom, and mom is perfectly dressed. I don't know how that woman looked so perfectly gathered and just pristine, carrying after 6 to 7 to 8 kids at the time, and she looked gorgeous, and you get to see the old cars that we had, and you guys walking into the house.
Yeah, mom always dressed very nicely, but you got to remember she had to get all of us kids dressed too before she'd get herself dressed. I don't know. She must have started at 4 a.m. or something to get that done. But she looks like a movie star in those.
She does. And I remember a story about that mom tells is that she would have just regular, a house coat on or whatever during the day with the kids. And she'd put on a new dress before Dad came home from work.
Yeah.
You think my wife might do that? No, I'm lucky if she even says hello. No, I'm kidding. It's just a different time. They would, she put on a new dress. It just baffles me on that.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Real quick, just to add to that, you mentioned the cars, and I noticed, and I end up doing this too. I noticed when Dad was filming, he'd film everybody coming in, then he'd kind of film the cars a little bit. Like he wanted to record the cars he owned at a certain point in time, and it's great footage to see those old cars, And I found myself doing that over the years too. Going, oh, this is the old car we had when we went camping the first time, and it's fun to look back on those old beaters.
Of course, I recognize the red Pontiac station wagon because we could all cram in there. And we used to go to the movies, like the drive-ins, and we used to hide, some of us, because you used to have to pay by the person.
Right.
And fold down seats in the back.
Yeah.
So we'd hide a couple of us so we'd get in there a little cheaper. But that was a great car. What was that blue one? Do you remember what kind of car that was?
So that was the Chevy Impala, and I think it was a 65 Chevy Impala. And that was my first car that I drove to high school.
Oh, man.
And I drove that thing all through high school and just beat the tar out of it. But it was a great old car. Yeah. And, it's just really neat to see those old vehicles and reminisce about the old times around Easter and all the other holidays.
Yeah, and then I remember we celebrate birthdays, all these events, and there's a really great film of, I think it was Patty's birthday. I think she's either, 3 or 4 or somewhere around there. And it was just good to see all you guys at the ages that you were and how, just pristine and young and full of life and just all that stuff, and to see mom and dad and just birthday videos or film, I should say, were great. And then, we lived in such a beautiful place in Colorado that we'd get up to the mountains as our vacation. We with them having 8 kids, there wasn't a lot of trips to Disneyland or anything. And we won't talk about why you guys didn't go to Disneyland in 1968 when that was planned, because someone was going to be born and
Right.
ruined that whole vacation. But we wouldn't go, we couldn't get away and couldn't go places.
Yeah.
And so we'd go up to the mountains and spend a
Yeah.
lot of time in the Colorado Rockies. And
Yeah.
now people pay, so much money to be able to go do that. And we just drive up there. And
Yeah.
so I remember there's a film that, is older. I had been, 10, 11 with Patty and mom and dad, just seeing the sights. And I don't know where we are. And, you'll see this and maybe you have an idea, but just enjoying the Colorado mountains and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know they made a lot of day trips to the South Platte River near Deckers because it was fairly close for them. And so I have seen a lot of photos in film from that time frame when they'd go up there for picnics. And, me being a fly fisherman, I see that river behind mom and dad in those pictures. And I'm thinking, oh man, that thing had to be pristine back then. And nobody had spooked all those fish in there. And so I just drool over those photos of the South Platte River. But those were good day trips. And do you remember tubing down the South Platte
Oh yeah, and
too?
it was a kind of a curve in the river, went kind of like around a small mountain, right? Like I'm trying to
Yeah,
draw it
yeah,
over here. So we
right.
drop in one place, and then it'd take us around to the other side, and then we'd
Yeah,
have to hike back over with our
yeah,
tubes and do it again.
yeah,
But it was so much fun. That water was so cold at times, though.
yeah,
And a little
yeah.
story about that. I'm going to the South Platte, going to river. I was 4 or something like that, and I fell in. And I think, did you save me? I can't remember. Maybe Phil, Lou, one of the guys. One of you guys just grabbed me out of the river. But of course, my pants, their overalls were soaking wet. So Dad
Yeah.
decided to dry them by putting them on the barbecue grill.
Yeah, got him a little too
A
close to the
little too
campfire.
close, and you all just didn't like me in the car because I smelled like a campfire on the way home. It's like, what is that? Oh, that's Chris's pants.
Yeah, yeah, and with holes in them.
Exactly. But
Yeah,
we talked about how great Christmas was, and mom and dad just spent all their money that they had, they'd save up for our Christmases. So another thing that you don't recognize when you're a kid, but when you're an adult, I don't remember mom and dad giving each other many gifts at Christmas time. They gave to us. And
yeah,
so there is some rare film of when mom and dad gave each other some gifts. I remember mom got some earrings that she really wanted one year. I'm
mhm,
not sure if it's in this film or not,
yeah,
but yeah, they didn't spend on each other very much. They wanted to do it for us. So I'm
yeah,
thankful.
yeah. That was a nice sacrifice they made, and it wasn't until later in life, I think, as they had fewer kids at home, that they were able to once again give gifts to each other. But
Yeah.
that's kind of parents they were. We always came first.
Yeah. And I benefited from both of those things. I was able to share with you guys when we didn't have much, and we did a lot of family things to when you all were out of the house. And it was just me left. And I remember we got a VCR, and that was
Hmm.
cool. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
got to live in both of those worlds and was thankful for my childhood for sure. But
yeah.
some of those other films we had were some really cool things of when we'd have some relatives visit. Do you remember one of those?
Yeah, I do. And it was really a special time because they didn't come out very frequently. And one time, Dad's brother, Marcy, our Uncle Marcy, came out for a visit. And do you remember what Uncle
Yeah.
Marcy did?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Uncle Marcy was the one that loaded the A bomb that we got to see in the last episode. Yeah.
right. So he made a couple of trips out, one before you were born, and then one later in the years when you were born. And it was great to get to know him a little bit at that point in time. And boy, there's another guy I would like to have sat down with and talked about World War II with for sure.
Yeah, and I see in this film that you guys are throwing the football around in the front yard, and
Yeah.
I think it's you and Phil, and I think Patty makes an appearance at the end, and our sister Kathy.
Yeah.
And I love that Kathy's there because Kathy was a great athlete and kind of a
Yeah.
tomboy. I don't think she'll be
Yeah.
upset about us saying that, but
No,
she
no.
could hold her own with the
Oh yeah.
boys and play
Yeah.
football. So it doesn't surprise me that she's in that film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just great old memories. And, we didn't get to see a lot of the relatives over the years, but there was another brother that came out, if you recall.
Yeah, it was really cool. Uncle Jamie came out and visited. Now, Uncle Jamie, of course, was the brother that Dad ran into in Belgium and has that great shot where, Dad's flicking his helmet.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Uncle Jamie came out, and this is when I was around. I had to been, around, I think I'm always about 10 or 11 because I have no idea how old I'm in these photos. But, he was from Pittsburgh. I think he brought me a Pittsburgh hat that I'm wearing. And he was my buddy. Yeah, we spent some good time together, and we went up to Central City, which is now kind of a casino touristy thing. But back then,
gambling town.
Yeah, back then it was just, I remember they had rock candy, hard candy and all these old things. And there's a bar with a painting on the floor that is real historic. That the guy, painted this to pay for his tab, and then they have it roped off, and it's really cool from back in the 1800s. And so, Uncle Jamie took me up there, and we spent a great day together. And we went to one of the gold mines, the old gold mine tour. And they take you back there. I think even a donkey kind of pulls you back in there. And Uncle Jamie liked his cigars. And I remember him going we were on this cart and going into the mine, and the tour guide saying, "Sir, you got to put out the cigar. We're kind of deep in the mountain here, and there could be some gases and stuff." So Jamie didn't like that. Uncle Jamie didn't like that too much.
Yeah.
He was a good friend, and that was one of my cherished memories of growing up. But like you said, we didn't get a chance to see our relatives too much at all, and that's unfortunate. A lot of times, they were all back in Pittsburgh, and I know my wife has a ton of cousins that she kind of grew up with, and we kind of missed out on that a little bit, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, we did. It would have been nice to know our cousins. And, as adults, you've gone with me. We've gone back to Pittsburgh with Mom years ago. I think 2016 was the last time we went back there with Mom, and Phil and Lou went with us. And so we got to visit with the relatives then and the cousins then. And I took my sons back there a few years ago when we went to a Steelers game, or should I say Stillers game.
Steelers.
And
went? Did Yins go?
Yeah, Yins. Yeah.
Okay.
So we've had a chance to see our cousins as adults, but it doesn't really compare. But Mom's was closest with her sister Doris, and Doris and her husband Jerry, who she married after her first husband passed away and Jerry's wife had passed away. They would come out and see Mom and Dad and take a lot of trips together. So they were able to build that bond, and I know Mom really cherished that.
Right, and Doris was the one that baked the brownies with the mechanical nut. Yeah, that was in there, not the actual, like a peanut that was in the thing, and got shipped back from Italy from Dick when he was there. It's just great childhood memories. I love watching these old films and seeing the old photos, and we're so very fortunate that we have all of our 6 brothers and sisters still with us, so I don't know. Let's get to know them now.
Hi, I'm our World War II dad's and mom's firstborn child, Claudia Kangilla McAdam.
Hi, I'm our World War II dad and mom's second child. I'm Linda.
Hi, I am our World War II dad's and mom's third child, Kathy.
I'm our World War II dad's and mom's 4th child, and my name is Lou Cangella.
Hi, I'm our World War II mom and dad's 6th child, Philip Cangella.
Hi, I'm our World War II dad and mom's 7th child. I'm Patty.
Well, I guess that makes me their 5th child.
And I guess I'm the 8th.
Well, I guess we can be on their screen this way.
Once again, I'm last in line, but I kind of feel like this is like a Brady Bunch kind of thing. Ken, do me a favor. Look around a little bit. That was kind of fun, huh?
That was, and boy, that Cangella crew cleans up pretty well.
Not too bad. Not too bad for us being a little older than we were in those family films.
Yeah.
Let's get back to our story with Dad. It's getting into the 80s, right? Dad celebrated a big achievement, but it was also kind of a tough decade for him.
Yeah. World War II's long in the rearview mirror now, and he's just doing his thing, and he's working at C.H. Robinson in Denver, which, interestingly enough, he was at a location called Denargo Market, which is pretty much right next to where Coors Field sits today, and that area has changed dramatically. But yeah, he worked at Denargo Market as a produce broker for many, many years before he retired in the mid 80s.
Yeah, I remember that retirement. I think you just graduated from college. I think Phil was in college. Patty was wrapping up high school or starting college. And, I was at All Souls getting ready for high school, or maybe I was in high school by then. It's hard to remember as we get older. But, I remember that retirement party and Dad's joy about, a job well and done. He was done and he was free to, golf and play poker with his friends, all the stuff that he didn't get to really do when he was, working and raising us. But that didn't last too long, did it?
No, and kind of the reason he retired, and I'm glad he did retire when he did, is he had some heart issues in 1983 that required quadruple bypass surgery, which, in today's medicine, they're much better at that. And a lot of times they don't even have to do open heart surgery, but this is an open heart surgery. And so they took him into the hospital to do that. And when they closed the chest wound, they used this kind of wax to kind of close the wound with the sutures. And Dad got a really bad infection from that wax, and it really put him down for a long time. He had a long hospital stay, and he finally recovered enough to go home. But it was a long haul. I think he was in the hospital for 2 or 3 months post surgery.
Yeah, we almost lost him. It was quite scary. I'm in high school, so I'm absorbed in all my nonsense and really didn't hit home. And I'm sure you being older, it really was a scary time for all of us. But thank God that he recovered and did bounce back a bit and did some things that he loved doing. He got out on the golf course again, which I know is probably what drove him to recover. And did some charity golf and really had an opportunity to do some things that he loved doing so much, right?
Yeah, he did. He loved golf, and it really worked out well that he retired at a younger age than most men would, because it gave him and Mom a chance to finally travel. They had some great times traveling together, and with Doris and Jerry. So they finally kind of got their reward for a life, well lived and with all their hard work. So they did get some fun, but eventually the infection in his chest had caused him to be on a lot of antibiotics. And those antibiotics damaged his kidneys. So he had to go to dialysis. And I don't know how often it was, once a week, twice a week, things like that. And probably more and more as time went on, he had to go to dialysis. And he never complained about it. He was really, really a tough guy about all that stuff, never bemoaned it at all. And Mom took him and took care of him. Like, Mom's practically a nurse anyway, as we all know. And she took really good care of him all through those dialysis treatments.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't ever hear Dad complain about anything that was going on with him. He'd complain about us and us being annoying, but he never complained about what he was going through. And he would always just want a little bigger slice of cake, and then the cake wouldn't be there. And I think he depended on some of his daughter-in-laws to maybe give him a little bigger slice of cake, even though he's not supposed to have that stuff. But Mom took very good care of him. I mean, she's a saint. But we kind of saw Mom slipping a little bit in not keeping good care of herself. That happens a lot with couples, that they give everything to their spouse, especially when they're sick and they aren't taking care of themselves and getting sleep and rest. So yeah, it was hard on Mom as much as it was hard on Dad.
Sure it was. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
No, you have to do this one, buddy.
All right. So, the dialysis took its toll on Dad. And, I remember I was on a business trip in Las Vegas and I was in a meeting, and my wife calls and I step out of the meeting and she said, "Hey, your dad collapsed after dialysis. You need to get home." Yeah. And, I had to make the long trip home, and she called me at the airport and before I got on the plane in Vegas, and she had given me the news that he had passed away.
Yeah, it was extremely tough. And it was odd because the month before he passed away is the month I moved to Chicago. And I booked a flight home on November 12th, the day he died, to gather up and pack up my house. Our brother Lou was going to help me load up the truck and move all that stuff to Chicago. And Mom said one of Dad's last words was, I got to go over and see if those boys are packing up the house right. Because he was one of those guys that wanted to make sure the truck was done correctly. So, yeah, it was tough. It was remarkable. I was in Chicago. I booked a flight home that day that he passed. So there's something odd about I was here in town. You and I were the only ones that were out of town, the day before or whatever. Everybody else was still in Colorado. And it was a little tough to have that happen, and didn't get really a chance to see him up right before that happened. But, he was in a lot of pain as far as doing this dialysis. He wasn't enjoying his life. It was taking its toll on him and our mom. So you never want this stuff to happen, but it did. And it led to a celebration of his life. Really, we didn't want to have this funeral, but he's been sick for a while, and we were ready to do that funeral and do it right.
Yeah, it was a beautiful ceremony. It was at All Souls Church, which is where Dad had volunteered all the years, sang in the choir, ushered, paid for all of us kids to go to school there, which had to be a burden. So it was full circle. We went back to All Souls for his funeral, and your buddy delivered the eulogy, isn't that right?
Yeah, my friend and a friend of the family, a guy named Philip Palmer, who I was working with at KCNC News 4 in Denver, did deliver that, because there was no way that any one of us was going to be able to make it through. I can't even make it through 30 years later talking about it.
Yeah.
So, it was great that he did our family this service. And I think Claudia wrote the eulogy. Our sister Claudia wrote the eulogy, and he delivered it to perfection. And Philip was a guy that played softball with us, right? And just, I think Dad liked him sometimes more than he liked us. He was, there's a funny story where Philip, curses in front of my dad, and you would never curse in front of our dad. And Dad's like, what did he say? He was all interested in this stuff. I'm like, if I would have said it, you would have been mad at me. So he loved Philip. And I remember, we played softball with him. And I remember this story. I would run our Channel 4 team, a softball team, and people couldn't always play. And I'd always ask them, can you help out? Is there somebody that can help out? Right. And I had you guys play, like, can you come play? And I would always have to wrangle people in there, and you need, 9 or 10 to play. And I didn't have enough. And I was telling Mom about it. And Mom said, you know what your father just said to me? I said, no. And this is late. This is Dad's, pretty sick.
Yeah.
He goes, honey, I don't think I can run. But if Chris needs somebody on his team, I think I could probably catch. So here's this man, a dialysis patient that could, barely, now he could walk, but took a lot of toll on him, that said he would catch. And that's just one of those things that he would do for us.
Yeah, he wanted to come out and play catcher, and Mom had to, I think, hold him back. He was chomping at the bit. And, when he was in Tilf, Belgium, those guys played flag football and they played softball when they were there and in Norway. So he was an athlete, and I'm sure sitting there, he wanted to get out there and mix it up with the rest of the guys.
Right. The mind is still willing, but as we can attest to, as we get older, the body usually isn't. So, we had a nice celebration of his life. It was a great funeral and the reception afterwards. And then we had to go to, take care of him and put him in this earth.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that really touched me at the funeral was my son Kyle was 8 at the time. And it really made an impression on him with all the things that were going on. And he wrote a poem that he actually went up and read after Philip Palmer spoke. And I've got it here. It's real short. I'll read it. It's called My Grandpa by Kyle Kingella. And it says, I loved my grandpa. I'll miss him so. He was a soldier, that I know. He was in the war and very brave. He jumped downstairs into a cave. He loved my dad and grandma too. He loved to tell my dog what to do. He loved his grandkids and children too. By now he's feeling good as new. I think of his happiness and his smile. He loved his grandkids and me, Kyle. He spoiled us with treats all the years, and he pulled money out of our ears. I feel sad and good. I really should. Grandpa's probably golfing like I knew he would.
Wow. I've forgotten about that poem. And it does speak of all that, jumping into that cave. That's that story we talked about when he was a runner and running down those buildings and, getting shot at, and he dove into the building. So Kyle, at his young age, remembered those stories from Dad. and that how much of being a soldier was important to him.
Yeah.
And of course, golf, right?
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we made the trip out to Fort Logan, right, where Dad
Yeah.
was buried.
Yeah.
What a beautiful place that is, huh?
Yeah, Fort Logan is just a very peaceful place. It's a very large national cemetery for the veterans. Just goes on for acres and acres, and the white headstones, are all matching as you go through that cemetery. And of course, as a veteran, Dad got the military send off. He had a flag draped coffin, and the color guard was there to fold the flag. And our brother Lou did a really nice gesture and built a really neat cabinet to put the triangular shaped folded flag inside of. And to this day, it's in Mom's living room.
Yeah, I love looking at that when I do go visit Mom.
Yeah.
So I told the story that it was, me flying back home to make my final move to Chicago with my brother Lou. We
Yeah.
packed up the house, and we had this rented truck, and I had to get back to work. So Mom, being the stoic carry on, right? Like, don't worry, but carry on.
Yeah, right.
Says, okay, you boys, drive the rented truck, this 20-foot truck, to the cemetery for Dad's funeral, because I want you guys to leave right afterwards, because Chris has to get back to his job in Chicago. I was there a month, and she's worried that I was making a bad impression. And so, here we are, all our cars in this yellow big truck at the cemetery. And we went through an emotional, burial with Dad, and hugged all of you. And Lou and I got in the truck, started the 16-hour drive to Chicago, and probably for the first hour or two, rode in silence.
Yeah.
Because what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to have a conversation after you just buried your father? So it was a very emotional day, and something I'll truly remember about my move here. And, I've been here since, 1997, it's just crazy.
Yeah. You guys must have been emotionally exhausted and physically exhausted after driving that far and doing all that.
Yeah, it was a tough trip, but, Dad's been gone for a little over 25 years now. And some days it seems like, he was here just yesterday, and then others just seem so far long ago.
Yeah.
In those 25 years, I've gotten married, my wife, Lauren, and we started my own family with Brody and Cal and my daughter, Sydney. And, it's unfortunate Dad didn't get a chance to meet them. They didn't get a chance to meet him.
Yeah.
But, it's nice to be a father and know what he went through to take care of his family. And I learned a lot from both of those guys.
Yeah. When he was sick in the hospital back in 83, 84, we almost lost him then. And I can remember, and this is why I can relate to what you're saying. I can remember I was graduated from college and just working. And I remember thinking when Claudia called me and said, you need to get down here. He might not make it. Thinking that he's never going to see me get married. He's never going to meet my kids if I have kids and things like that. Fortunately for me, because I'm older than you, and he lived longer, and the doctors really helped him get a few more years from the mid 80s until 97, that he was able to go to my wedding and meet my wife, who used to give him neck rubs when he wasn't feeling good. And he got to meet both Kyle and Wes. And of course, made an impression on Kyle being 8. Wes was only 4 when he passed. So Wes has very limited memories. But yeah, I'm fortunate that I got that little bit of time with him. And I feel bad for you that you didn't get to experience those same things with him.
Yeah, it's just a little bit different, but, it had a different impact on me. So maybe hopefully made me a better father. But, you spoke of Kyle reading that incredible poem that he wrote, but he had a special connection with our World War II dad, didn't he?
He did, I think he was old enough to really have spent a good time with him and really enjoy being around him. And, Dad was so good with the grandkids. He really loved them up and played with them, and probably more so than us, because he was a busy man when we were kids, So it really made an impression on Kyle. And, we talked about it in one of the other episodes about me finding a penny in Europe and the whole pennies from heaven thing. And Kyle knew that story about pennies from heaven. So, when he turned 18, he wanted to get a tattoo. And, I said, you're a man, you do what you want to do. He went and got a tattoo, and he got a tattoo of a penny on his arm to remember Grandpa by. And I thought that was really touching.
Yeah, they had a really special connection. And, you just wish that you had an opportunity to talk to Dad more. I know you did, when you're doing all the research for this, and when we talked about this podcast, and just for that reason alone, I'd love to have an opportunity to talk to him.
Yeah. Can you imagine the conversations we could have with him now, Chris, that we're more educated on what he went through and we understand him better as a grown man now that, that we've grown up and raised families? We could really have some great conversations.
Yeah,
So,
it's a different perspective when you
yeah,
come at it from being an adult than being a child,
yeah,
as you can attest, and I'm attesting to now, we have grown adult children. And
yeah,
as they grow up, it seems like they catch up to us in age because we have shared experience. And, I know your oldest son, Kyle, who we've talked a lot about,
yeah,
just had his first child. So it's this whole new experience that
yeah,
you guys are sharing.
yeah,
And it's really cool.
yeah,
You
it
did a
is.
great job with all this research, of course. And then you did your trip to Europe, retracing his step, but why couldn't he have helped? It would have been a lot easier. Maybe we wouldn't have had a podcast. I don't know. Maybe he'd be on it, but he could have helped a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah, I think in his own way, he did help. He had his finger on
Finger.
my shoulder, putting me in the right places in Tilth and Malmedy. So he was there. He was
Yeah,
there.
I think you're right. All right. So before we wrap up this series, we have some future plans. Ken, you want to try to help us fill in our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, so God, that the Europe trip was really fantastic for me. And not only did I get to walk in Dad's footsteps, but there's so many good sights to see over there relative to World War II that I went and visited the majority of the big sites. And there's a lot I want to share with you that's not really the experiences of our World War II dad. He didn't fight in some of these campaigns, but the men that did fight were somebody else's dad or brother or uncle. And so in a future episode, I want to share some of those locations with you and talk about my experiences at those locations in World War II.
Yeah, I think that's a great plan. We've talked about this. So in the fall, we're going to try to release an epilogue episode that kind of shows all those sites and talks about the things that Ken saw that were with the other dads before they're even fathers, right? Out there. Some of them might have been fathers, who knows? But yeah, we want to do that. So we're asking you, our viewers, our listeners, if you have any dads, uncles, grandparents, even the moms that served during World War II, right? And the WWII. So, we want you, if you have those stories, to email us, and I'm going to give you the email address, and also maybe share that story with us in an email. So email us at ourworldwar2dad@gmail.com. So that's RWW, the number 2 at Gmail. Oh, excuse me, number 2, then dad@gmail.com. We posted it here. We'll put it in our link. Make sure that you have it. But please email us your story, but also maybe record a short video of yourself, kind of like we did with our siblings did, where they shot themselves, telling us that story. Maybe your most treasured memory of your relative serving in World War II. And we'd love to feature some of those in our epilogue episode. But, keep them short, keep them to 30 seconds, but email us as much as you want and tell us a story. We'd really appreciate it. And I think it's important to share. I mean, we've gotten some great responses already, right, Ken?
We have, and it's really great to get these responses and see other World War II dads and the pride that these men and women have of sharing those stories with us, because they were the greatest generation and they really sacrificed a lot for us, not just World War II, but leading up to the war, and then of course after the war they had to come home and start their lives. So yeah, keep them coming, because what we've seen so far is really fun to look at and really adds some visual interest for us.
Absolutely. So thank you for those that have already shared, and please look at that email, send us some stuff. We'd love to connect with you more on all that.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking about and hoping that I would come up with something profound to say at the end of this limited series, but, all I have is profound gratitude. And it's to you, Ken, for doing all this research on Dad and traveling to Europe and, retracing his steps, and then agreeing to take this journey with me in doing this podcast.
Well, thanks, Chris. But I got to say, it was your idea. You teased me about doing the whole PowerPoint presentation when I would share snippets from Europe with you. And you had the brilliant idea to put this together. And, from my seat, it feels like I'm just rambling on about things I did and saw. But when you pull it all together with the pictures and the before and afters and the segues and all that magic that you do behind the scenes, man, Chris, it just really made it impactful for me. And I know my wife's enjoyed it too. And I've talked to other family members that are, very impressed by it. And it's just a great record of Dad's history and Mom's history. We're so fortunate to have the parents that we had. And it just makes me really reflect on that and really thankful that our World War II dad and our World War II mom were the ones that we got.
Absolutely. And thank you for your kind comments. It's, a labor of love. We talk on Saturdays, usually when I'm putting this together, and, you're like, is it done yet? Not done yet. And you're like, I'm so sorry. You always apologize. I'm so sorry it's taking you so long. I'm like, Ken, I love doing this. You love to go out and fly fish. This is my fly fishing, to be in an edit situation and putting things together. It's where I find my joy. So it's a labor of love for sure. I'm also thankful for all of our viewers, out there listening and watching us on our podcast on YouTube and letting us indulge with these stories. It's just a good time. Mm-hmm. But I got to tell you, and I know you feel the same way, I'm most, grateful to our dad. Like many other fathers, that they, like we said, they might not have been fathers at the time, but they're probably were going to be fathers because that generation took care of people. Like many of those other fathers that gave of themselves to make sure that we had all that we have today. So thank you to them, and thank you to our World War II dad. Thanks for watching and listening to our World War II dad. Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss an episode.
And if you're just listening to the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. We would really appreciate it.